I was 27 days into what should have been a 3-week adventure when I realized I was going to die alone in the Bolivian rainforest. My feet had rotted down to raw meat. I hadn't eaten in 5 days, and I just watched a rescue plane fly overhead without seeing me. But let me back up to where this nightmare actually began. How it started. November 1981. I was 22, fresh out of the Israeli Navy, and I'd saved up enough money doing odd jobs to travel South America. I wanted adventure, the kind you read about in books like Papillon. Real, raw, dangerous adventure. I was in La Paz, Bolivia, when I met Marcus Stamm, a Swiss schoolteacher who was also traveling through South America. We'd only known each other a few days but decided to travel together. That's when we ran into Karl Ruprechter at a local cafe. Karl was Austrian, maybe in his 30s, and he had this way of talking that made everything sound possible. He said he was a geologist who'd spent years in the Amazon. He told us about a remote indigenous village called Torremonas that almost no outsiders had ever seen. He was planning an expedition there and needed partners. "I know the jungle," he said. "I know where to find gold, where the tribes are. It's a 6-day hike, maybe 7. Marcus and I talked about it that night. It sounded incredible. We met an American photographer named Kevin Gale who was also interested. None of us really knew each other. We'd all just met in La Paz, but that didn't matter. We were young, stupid, and hungry for adventure. 2 days later, the 4 of us flew to a village called Apollo, then took a riverboat deeper into the rainforest to Asariamas. That's where the real jungle began. The hike that went wrong. Karl said we'd hunt for food, so we packed light, just rice, beans, salt, and mosquito nets. The first few days were tough but manageable. We hacked through dense undergrowth, waded through streams, got eaten alive by insects. But we were doing it. We were in the Amazon. Then we started hunting monkeys. I'd never killed anything before. The way they screamed when Karl shot them down, the way their eyes looked at us as we cooked them. It was horrible, but we were hungry, and Karl insisted this was how you survived in the jungle. Marcus refused to eat the monkey meat. "I can't do it," he kept saying. He survived on small portions of rice while the rest of us ate. By day 5, Marcus's feet started getting infected. The constant wetness, the mud, the walking, blisters turned into open sores. By day 7, he could barely walk. We had to slow down, and Karl's 6-day hike stretched into 10 days with no village in sight. "We need to turn back," Kevin finally said. Karl agreed. Marcus couldn't continue, and we were running low on supplies. We backtracked to the last village, and Karl suggested a new plan: build a raft and float down the Tuichi River to Rurrenabaque, a town about 250 miles away. It would be faster than walking. Local villagers helped us build a raft from balsa logs. It looked solid. We loaded our supplies and pushed off into the river, feeling optimistic again. The river would take us straight to civilization. Then we approached San Pedro Canyon. The split. Karl suddenly stopped paddling. "We need to get off the river," he said. "There are waterfalls ahead, rapids, rocks. We'll die if we continue." Kevin and I looked at the river. It seemed manageable. "I can't swim," Karl admitted. That's when I lost faith in him. This experienced jungle guide couldn't even swim? We argued for an hour. Finally, we agreed to split up. Karl and Marcus would hike to a village called Iparama. Kevin and I would take the raft down the river. We'd all meet back in La Paz by Christmas. I hugged Marcus goodbye. He'd gotten so thin, so weak. "See you in a few weeks," I told him. The waterfall. Kevin and I felt free on that raft. No more Karl's questionable leadership, no more slowing down for Marcus, just the 2 of us and the river. The current picked up speed. The river narrowed. Suddenly, we were racing toward a massive boulder in the middle of the rapids. "Paddle left!" Kevin shouted. I paddled as hard as I could, but the raft wasn't responding. The boulder was getting closer. Kevin jumped into the water. I didn't understand why until the raft slammed into the rock with a sickening crack. The logs started splitting apart. Kevin was swimming for shore. I held on, hoping the raft would hold together. Then the raft broke free from the boulder and shot forward. I saw the waterfall ahead. No time to jump, no time to think. The world tilted and I went over. The water crushed me. I tumbled underwater, completely disoriented, my lungs burning. The pressure was incredible. I genuinely thought, this is it, I'm drowning. Then the river threw me to the surface. I gasped for air, grabbed onto a rock, pulled myself onto a small beach. I was alive. But Kevin was gone. The raft was destroyed, and I was completely alone. Day 1 alone. I spent that first night shivering on a boulder. The jungle sounds at night are terrifying when you're alone. Screeches, roars, rustling that could be anything. Every shadow looked like a predator. At dawn, I started walking upstream to find Kevin. He had to be alive. He was a strong swimmer. We'd find each other. Instead, I found the backpack. Kevin had prepared it before we got on the raft, our life bag with essential supplies. He'd tied it to empty containers so it would float. Somehow, it had washed into a small pool and survived. Inside, mosquito netting, a lighter, a flashlight, a knife, and some rice. I almost cried with relief. With these supplies, I could survive until I found Kevin. I put the backpack on and kept walking, leaving marks on trees so Kevin could follow my trail. Day 5, alone. I walked for 2 more days, searching for Kevin. I left arrows carved in tree bark, rocks arranged in patterns he'd recognize. I kept expecting to see him around every bend in the river. I studied the water-damaged map we'd brought. Carl had mentioned a gold mining camp called Copleor, maybe 4 days upriver. If I could reach it, there'd be people, supplies, a trail back to civilization. I started walking toward Copleor. I found what looked like a trail and followed it for hours, thinking it would lead to the mining camp. But the trail got fainter, twisted away from the river, led me deeper into the jungle. Then I saw a footprint in the mud, a hiking boot, fresh. My heart jumped. Kevin, he'd survived. He was ahead of me. I followed the footprints eagerly, certain I'd catch up to him. But the trail circled back on itself, and I realized the horrible truth. These were my own footprints. I'd been walking in circles. I was completely lost. Day 7 alone. That night, I heard breathing near my camp. Then I saw 2 eyes reflecting in my flashlight beam. A jaguar. It circled slowly, sizing me up. I was injured, weak, alone, perfect prey. My hands shook as I fumbled through the backpack. The lighter, where was the lighter? The jaguar moved closer. I could smell it now. I found the lighter and the can of mosquito repellent. I'd seen this in a movie once. I pressed the spray nozzle and held the lighter flame in front of it. A jet of fire shot out. The jaguar jumped back, startled. I waved my improvised flamethrower and yelled, making myself seem bigger than I was. The cat circled once more, then disappeared into the jungle. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lighter ready, jumping at every sound. When morning came, I discovered I'd been sleeping on a termite mound. My body was covered in bites, blood seeping from hundreds of tiny wounds. Day 10, alone. My feet were rotting. The constant wetness had caused the same infection Marcus had. The skin peeled away in sheets, leaving raw, bloody flesh. Every step was agony, like walking on broken glass. I remembered doubting Marcus, thinking he was exaggerating his pain. Now I understood. Now I had the same rotting feet, and I was completely alone with the pain. The infection spread to my hands. They became bloody and useless, unable to grip the knife properly to hunt. I tried catching fish with my hands. Failed. I tried making traps. Failed. I ate berries I couldn't identify, hoping they weren't poisonous. I dug for roots like an animal and shoved them in my mouth, dirt and all. I was starving. Day 12, alone. It rained for 3 days straight. Not normal rain, violent tropical downpours that made the river rise several feet. Everything I owned was soaked. I couldn't start a fire. The rice in my pack got infested with insects, but I ate it anyway because it was all I had. I kept walking toward where I thought Koplier should be. My feet were so destroyed I could barely walk. I started crawling on my hands and knees through the mud. Day 15, alone. I was resting by the riverbank when the rain suddenly intensified. Within minutes, the water started rising fast, too fast. Flood. I didn't think, I just ran to the nearest tree and started climbing. My infected hands were screaming in pain as I clawed my way up. The bark tore away what little skin I had left on my palms. The water rose to where I'd been lying. It kept rising. I climbed higher, wedging myself into a fork in the branches. The storm raged all night. Thunder cracked so close I felt it vibrate through the tree. Lightning turned everything white. The tree swayed in the wind, and I held on with everything I had, certain I was going to fall. When dawn finally came, I was so exhausted I could barely move. Every muscle in my body was locked up from holding the same position all night. My hands were numb. I couldn't feel my legs. I climbed down and collapsed in the mud. Everything was soaked. No fire, no dry clothes, no real food. I was 15 days alone, and I had no idea if I was even going in the right direction anymore. Day 18, alone. I heard it before I saw it, the unmistakable sound of an airplane engine. A plane! Rescue! I screamed and waved my arms, jumped up and down despite the agony in my feet. I did everything possible to be seen. The plane flew over and disappeared. They didn't see me. I was invisible under the jungle canopy. I collapsed and cried. That was my last hope, and it flew right past me. Day 20, alone. The pain in my feet became unbearable. I couldn't walk, couldn't think clearly because of the pain. I saw a tree covered in fire ants, thousands of them. In desperation, I shook the tree onto my head. The ants fell on me and started biting immediately. The pain was incredible, like being shocked with electricity. My whole body was on fire from the bites. But it worked. The overwhelming pain from the ant bites distracted me from my feet just enough that I could keep moving. The adrenaline rush pushed me forward. I don't know if that was smart or insane. Probably insane. Day 22. Alone. I found Koplier, or what was left of it. The flood had destroyed everything. Where there should have been buildings and equipment and people, there was only mud and debris. The camp was completely gone. I collapsed. This was my final destination, my last hope. I'd crawled for over 2 weeks to reach this place, and there was nothing here. My body was shutting down. The infection from my feet had spread up my legs, red lines tracking the poison through my body. I had a fever that made everything shimmer and blur. I hadn't eaten in days, not real food anyway, just a few bugs I'd managed to catch. I looked at my feet. They weren't feet anymore, just shapeless lumps of infection and pus. I was going to die here. I lay down in the mud and thought, just let it end. Let me rest. Day 27. I was lying on the riverbank, too weak to move, when I heard buzzing. A wasp, a bee, something flying near my head. I tried to wave it away, annoyed that even in death, insects were tormenting me. Then I raised my head and saw it wasn't an insect. It was a canoe with an outboard motor, and standing in the front was Kevin. Kevin Gale, alive. I tried to shout, but nothing came out. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. I could only watch as the canoe came closer. "Stay where you are," Kevin yelled. "Stay where you are." He jumped out before the canoe even touched shore and ran to me. He pulled me into his arms and we both cried. We just held each other and cried.